This is a meeting we've been having every quarter for, 4 or 5 years now. And exactly 2 years ago, the corporate convening came together to discuss exactly what you guys need in the business world out of the STEM advocates in Greater Austin. Funny that even with the 2 years, the hectic 2 years that have passed, not a lot has changed. The two top priorities are we need employees. And we also need, as part of having good, well-trained and equipped employees, we need to have good PD that goes with it, right? PD as in teacher professional development. So we frankly have picked up where we've left. The good news is education and the criticality is very well understood by everybody, whether you have a kid or not. You saw and heard kids in the background, for at least a year, if not 2 years. And so everybody began to appreciate what it took to educate. So we're in a much better position. We spent our last year when the legislative session was in, advocating for broadband as a baseline that you can't get to STEM and that kind of equity for all kids. And the operative word there is all kids, if you are not able to connect. So Trish, if you'll go to the next slide, let me run through the agenda real quickly. This is going to be a lot of dialogue. We want your feedback and involvement. One of the key players that has been missing with all the work that has been done in the legislature, in the advocacy world, is really the corporate world and the voice that says we need our economics to change. We need to have, as I like to say it, homegrown Texas talent. Many of you are challenged with that every day. And then we've got big companies, we all know the names, coming into town, and they're either usurping talent that's already here or importing a dramatic amount of talent. So what we're going to do today is, with your input, we're going to re-examine the, if you will, the problem statement from a corporate perspective. We are going to then, with Austin leading us, and by the way, Austin, I know he's got the name, but he's also a Texan, even in DC. So got all that cowboy understanding and influence with him. But Austin is going to lead us with the call to action. Really, what are some ideas and solutions? How do we galvanize and really think through 1 or 2 hot topics we can move forward? We can't solve, if you will, world hunger or STEM for all, in a matter of a couple of steps. And then hopefully we can get a lot more focused on an advocacy working group, and a working group that allows us not to just meet every, a quarter as a corporate convening, but get ourselves prepared for the 2023 legislative session. Along with the fact there's still ARPA funds, for those of you who recognize some of the federal funding terminology out there that has not been committed. And so maybe we can get, our hands on a little bit of that money and direct it. So next slide. And believe me, it's only 2 or 3 more slides, that's it. Thank you. So when we look at the problem that's outstanding, it's not just Texas, it's across the nation. Everybody is looking for some STEM skilled candidates. And that's probably one of the education pieces I think you guys all get, but maybe a vast majority of people don't get. Most of you have heard me say, especially when I chatted with the mayor's council, every kid out there needs it. I had my trash guy come through, right? Recycling guy on an iPad with a robotic arm putting the cans in. So this is not about just kids going into STEM. This is about STEM, CS, and all of those 21st century skills that kids are going to need. And so that's a problem for all of us out there. The second piece is we've really got to have our legislators and TEA think about this as not a luxury, but a necessity. And I think many of you know that TEA right now is a 1-2-man band as far as how many bodies are in there that care about STEM. We do understand there's some kind of weaving together as STEM and CS. And so that's really great at TEA, but there's just not as much focus as that we would like. So with that, what we're going to do is open this up for a dialogue. I think Trish has put in the chat a link. There we go. So that you can throw ideas out, but we'd really like this to be an open conversation. We've got NI, we've got Texas Mutual, I'm trying to run through all the names. I think we've got Google Fiber. John Michael, hadn't met you before, I don't think, so welcome. We've got Joel. We'd really like some of your comments, Melanie, and thoughts. Let me throw one more slide up for the background. And just more data points to ponder. Right now, this is maybe a couple months old at best, there are 53,000 open CS type of jobs here in the state. And we only have 4,000 kids graduating with CS as an example. And then if you look below, these stats have only gotten a little further depressed. We're in the middle of the pack being Texas right now, as far as how we're doing with science and math. And again, if we don't get those skills up, we're not going to be able to fill those economic requirements that you guys have out there. So thoughts, comments? I'll pop over to the chat as well, but love to rather hear your dialogues versus just have them typed in. This is where the coffee kicks in, and you're welcome to get chatty.
Tracy, hi, it's Catherine Prath with NI.
Good morning.
How are you?
Welcome.
Great to see you too, Trisha and Michael. Absolutely, NI is recently had the opportunity to testify in support of the Texas House Bill 244, which would fund more training in the state for computer science educators. And so we are, and then we've recently, we've worked with Austin, our government affairs, Matt Krupnick, had an opportunity to help tee up some speakers from NI to participate in panels. So we are really vested. We see this, we agree with the problem statement, and we're committed to doing what we can to help with advocacy.
Excellent. Do you think that frames the challenge at a high level? Again, we've got a long road ahead of us, but we're trying to start with something, very specific. And we've just got Texas lacks the skilled talent, homegrown talent, skilled and homegrown, probably the operative word for the expected growth. And again, we're not into wordsmithing. I just want to make sure people have areas you think we've missed or need to be expanded on, or if we're in totally the wrong place.
So I'm curious about the focus on salary as opposed to filling the pipeline.
I think that's just
could you speak to that a bit more, Tracy?
Yeah, I think that was meant to be just a data point because ultimately we want everybody in Texas to be able to make a sustainable living wage, I think is the operative word there. That is a data point. And I think your point is well taken, that that may be a high bar that everybody's going to be running after, a roughly three-figure salary. But I think pipeline is a good clarification there.
Yeah.
Do other folks want to chime in with some of the workforce challenges that perhaps they're experiencing in Texas, and what they're trying to do to fill those workforce challenges?
This is Ann at AMD. I don't necessarily, I'm not part of HR. I do hear, I am in meetings where people are talking about, how difficult it is to fill some of the jobs and competing with probably most of the companies on this call for the same talent. And one of the things is I'm looking at the math and the science grades and how our ranks have gone down. I need to I probably ought to take a review of some of the legislation that's out there, and also some of the standards around how much math and science kids have to take. I believe in one of the sessions, and I don't remember which one, the requirements for the different maths and sciences went down a little bit. So the kids were not required to take as much math and science. So I wonder how much of this, at a state level is also part of an statewide education issue around bringing up some of those standards. And I don't know how to do that necessarily, but there's probably a lot of people on this call who have had some experience around that particular area. I really worry that if we continue to dumb down math and science with the curriculum, we're not going to be able to get that talent because there's just not enough people that are going to take the courses.
I agree.
Mhm, mhm.
One of the things that I've seen, I just transitioned from Samsung to Nepris, and I have a deep passion for workforce development. And like you said, there is a real war for talent, not just in our region. And one of the things that I found useful was one, connecting with, if you think about companies having to go all the way back to K-12 to start their talent pipeline, this is where businesses are. And so what do businesses do? What can businesses do? And a lot of companies have K-12 outreach initiatives, but they're not maximizing those initiatives in my mind. And so what I mean is, how do I associate number one, what my company brand with what you're learning in the classroom and the future jobs that what you're learning, can lead to. So teacher externships are absolutely critical because teachers need to know, number one, let industry help bring some validation to what you're teaching so that students are inspired and engaged to want to continue to learn math and science and those kind of things, or, computer science, and number two, it gives children exposure to what career opportunities are out there. A lot of us on the call, I don't want to but career development or career day, we met a doctor, a lawyer, a policeman, a firefighter, and a teacher. There you go.
Yeah.
Right. But there's so many opportunities out there that children don't even know exist in terms of career exploration. And so we have to do, as a community, a better job of showing and highlighting STEM careers, or exposing to students to STEM careers so that they can see, I meet so many, and I work with so many engineers that said, oh, I talked to somebody when I was in 8th grade, my dad's friend who was an engineer, and that's what made me want to be an engineer. But we have to make or do a better job of career exploration and bringing work-based learning to the classroom so that we can help teachers, again, like I said, bring validation to what it is that they're teaching, and then also show students, a path.
And Melanie, you bring up a good point. CTE, or Career Technical Education, at TEA had 2 vacant openings for the better part of a year. Now, lots going on, we get it. One has been filled. We're hoping there's going to be some traction, but that is a big component in trying to get kids excited on taking these seemingly hard classes. But as we all well know, if you don't start younger, by the time you may think it's interesting, it's such a huge hill to climb that kids are overwhelmed. And that's assuming their parents can help them. Sometimes parents have no idea what their kids should be taking to position them down the road when that little spark goes off.
It's so true. And another thing is, there are opportunities in companies, even within Samsung. I created several programs that allowed us to grow our own workforce. What I mean by that is, if you can think about a subway map, right? You get on and get off at different stations to show a complete pathway. This level 1 certification gets you into the technician role. This associate's degree gets you into this master technician role. If you continue on, you can get your engineering degree so you can be like showing all the pathways. I know that companies hire at all levels. Some jobs absolutely require a degree, and then some you can start at a level and continue to build without the college debt, without, there's lots of earn and learn programs. But that's another way businesses should highlight how they are offering those earn and learn opportunities so that while children are in high school or while they're in K-12, right? So that they can see, oh, I don't necessarily have to go to start immediately paying $45,000 a year out of pocket when I have a company who's going to, number one, give me experience and, you know, reimburse my tuition so I can graduate without debt and 4, 5, 6 years of experience.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that Melanie, you have a really good point. You touched on something too. I thought about role models and the importance of the kids that are coming up through K through 12 being able to see themselves in the field. And so you asked the question, Tracy, about what corporate partners are doing. Within NI, you know, we have a particular focus on diversifying the STEM pipeline. But we partner with organizations like Autumn, with Michael Ward is on the call today. And one of the things that we really love about the Autumn organization is the upskilling and reskilling of adults. We all focus on K through 12, and there's different things that we're all doing, but Autumn really extends that to 16 to 74-year-olds. So that's a really powerful thing, is to be able to partner with organizations that are doing some amazing work in the community. Code to College is another one, you know, that we work with, as well as Project Lead the Way, and we're focusing with Project Lead the Way. There's opportunities with, you know, computer science, education, and building those pathways from K through 12. So the vertical pathways in through the school districts, and so, you know, partnering with really strong, you know, nonprofit partners who are doing some amazing work is one way, and it goes beyond, you know, writing the checks. It's about how we can support things like internships and apprenticeships and you know, mentoring. There's lots of opportunities that I think corporate partners have to make a difference in this area. So I love what you had to say, Melanie, about the importance of role models too. So having those opportunities to go into the schools and to you know, to see you know, to see for the kids to be able to see themselves in those fields in the future.
Any other comments on problem statement? Hi, Dr. Torby. I noticed you joined us. Yep. Any other thoughts or comments before we then have Austin chat a little bit with the whole group about potential solutions to move forward? All right, I'm gonna ask Trish to move the slide, and Austin from Dallas and DC, welcome.
Yep, Austin from Dallas, Fort Worth, but now living in Washington. But I am back home in Texas, which is, I still consider my home. I try to get back once a month just to see how everything's going. So always going to be a Texan. Texas is always in my heart, so really passionate about this, even up here from Washington. So overall, the call to action here, and to your point, we want policymakers and education leaders to prioritize STEM and CS education, and that's talked about within this need to change how the education system approaches this issue comprehensively. And so it sounds like a very broad and pie in the sky goal, but we've done this in other states, and we've done it successfully because we've led this desire to have a comprehensive systemic change with an industry-led focus. And policymakers, you know, they resonate with industry the most because, you know, those are the folks who provide the jobs in their districts. And they're the people who, you know, industry is the economic backbone of, you know, everything we do, not just in Texas, but around the country. So that's why we're kind of holding this convening, and why this call to action is going to start with an industry-led focus. But throughout these conversations, we will loop in, you know, our colleagues in the education space to talk about and develop an advocacy agenda that resonates with industry, but also with those who make it happen in the classroom and in after school and career and technical education spaces, community colleges, the university system. So, you know, overall, this call to action, just broadly, our I guess our tagline is we want policymakers and education leaders to no longer see STEM and computer science education as a luxury, just available only to a certain few students or those communities that have the resources to provide them, but to every single student in Texas. And we want, I guess the other tagline that we have is we want STEM and computer science to be taught every single day. So to be able to do that, our call to action includes a call to provide sustainable funding, to better blend and braid funding from federal sources and state sources to make that happen. So we're not necessarily asking for new funding, but there's a lot of funding out there that could be used better. We're asking for systems and workforce alignment, so better aligning what's being taught in the K-12 classroom to after-school opportunities, to community college, to higher education in the university system, but also making sure that everything that is being taught has some sort of alignment to the workforce and our workforce goals, whether that's locally driven, community driven, or statewide in our economic goals. And then the third thing is none of this can happen without qualified teachers that had the STEM literacy to be able to deliver the content. And so we're calling for more investment in professional development and also teacher recruitment and retention, and working with industry in a public-private partnership way to bolster the teacher pipeline in STEM subjects. So that's overall our broad call to action. We can go down, I think, a nice conversation here on what else is needed. There's a lot, but these are our three broad buckets. So from an industry standpoint, I guess the question that I'll ask is, what else can government do? What else can policymakers do to, I think, better support your workforce needs, I guess your goal to be involved in education outreach? What can policymakers do? I'll go ahead and open up the conversation with that question.
Hey, Austin, this is Ann Fertitta at AMD. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious to know if, and I almost hate to even venture into this water because a lot of people have very visceral reactions on either side. But I think one of the things is it is very expensive to get a STEM degree or to get any degree anymore. But is there any legislation or anything, any movement in the DC area to do anything around like maybe loan forgiveness for students, especially, lower income students who are, barely making it by only on student loans, for any kind of a, loan forgiveness around if you're going into a STEM field and, your family's income is under X amount of dollars, then your college debt is forgiven?
Yes, there have been bills introduced here in DC to make that happen. It's not actually there's not a federal program in existence, except if that workforce component is tied to federal government employment or employment with the military. So if there's that, if you go through one of these STEM programs and then take on some debt, but then work in a federal government position or do a federal government fellowship or work with the military, then that debt is forgiven. There have been proposals to do that in STEM industry just broadly, but where there are examples of these kinds of programs are in other states. Like Washington State has a good program for this. I think Virginia has one where, graduates that take on debt that, fall within a certain income bracket, but major and get a degree in STEM fields and transition into STEM employment, or what many of these bills term as high needs fields, then that will be forgiven last dollar, not necessarily first dollar. And it's a very effective way to get folks into STEM fields. And that's one opportunity that we could pursue in legislative session. I think that would be it's very popular on both sides of the aisle, actually.
Great,
I
thank
think,
you.
I think loan forgiveness too, especially to grow 9-12 education in computer science and STEM fields, I think there may be some really big opportunities to try and lure students who have loans, who have technical or STEM degrees into the teaching field for a few years to teach at schools that are Title I schools and really kind of supercharge STEM education in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And there's even federal programs to support these efforts. They're not necessarily tied to STEM, but you know, like folks like the programs like Teach for America that get potential teachers in Title I schools for no cost teaching certification and master's degrees, very popular programs. But yes, again, there are other states that have done this specific to STEM to support the teacher pipeline there. And they've also taken an approach to get more STEM teachers of color so that there's more teachers that look like the students that they're teaching to inspire, I think, a more diverse pipeline.
So is there anything that can be done, or, and then this is just an off suggestion. We talk about job creation and, you know, the need for, you know, moving people into more STEM careers. So having incentives for companies that, number one, create jobs in STEM and offer earn and learn, right? So not, rather than on the front end, right? You're going to school. We know the last statistic that I saw was 73% of college graduates don't work in the field they went to school for. But if you're earning and learning, like you're doing it while you're going, I think that'll have a more impactful end result. So rather than do it on the front end, partner or incentivize companies that have earn and learn programs in the STEM field or that are creating jobs in whatever field, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that can be all tied back to the career and technical education space or the workforce development, what we call WIOA. And right now there's like the registered apprenticeship system to where the federal government will subsidize earn and learn opportunities for students that are in certain institutions or certain employers, so that the federal government is basically subsidizing that wage while the student is earning a earn and learn opportunity.
Okay, then can I ask that they make that a little less bureaucratic? Trying to go through that process
Yeah,
is very difficult.
it's a very hot conversation in DC right now, and it's very split between, I guess, honestly, the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats are in favor of a registered apprenticeship system, and there's merit on both sides of this issue. They want to make sure that the credentialing that comes from private industry is at least recognized beyond that certain employer, which is why they want to keep it registered. So that, you know, if you earn a certain credential at Samsung, and perhaps this employee does not want to stay there, then that credential that they earned at Samsung can be transferred over to Dell, and they will have that same skill set, and Dell will recognize that. So like that's kind of the balance.
And maybe companies, so the apprenticeship we were trying to establish at Samsung was already part of an accredited degree program that ACC was offering, that UT was offering, right? But it was such, I mean, we had to contract a company that in San Antonio to even help us navigate that process.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely bipartisan recognition that the bureaucracy can be far lessened. It's just making sure that the accreditation process still has merit just beyond individual employers. And so the way to, I think the Democrat solution to do that is to keep it registered, but certainly take away a lot of that bureaucratic mess to getting it started.
Yeah, like what I was saying is not, maybe there's some companies have their own internal apprenticeship type thing, but if you're tying it to something that's already accredited, for example, a plumber's license, or that it's already existing, an engineering degree, that should be far less stuff that we have to, hoops that we have to jump through to get it registered.
Yep, and that's part of the systems alignment piece. And that's a bipartisan thing, is like if you're participating in a program in conjunction with an accredited community college or accredited university, then the bill that's being written right now, it has the language to where it's already tied in into it, so you don't have to go through all the bureaucratic mess if it's already an accredited partner. So that's good news there.
Good.
Any other
I'd
thoughts?
love- I was going to say, I'd love to see any more reactions. There's probably, it's bifurcated in the, I'll call it 12 through 16. As you get to the back end of your senior year, there's some credentialing that's starting to happen, et cetera, in the high school arena. I have to laugh. I've got a senior. I'm wondering what he's going to do the second half of his senior year. And there would have been a lot more that he could have accomplished. So I say that as the more adult, the area that Autumn serves. And then there's the K through 12. I think, Anne, you made a comment about math standards, et cetera. Any appetite or thoughts or comments about that? One of the things we've talked about in the past is this whole idea of algebra in 8th grade. Right now that's completely left to the school districts as to how does that happen. And yet, if you don't get algebra somewhat in middle school and or like some of the basic foundations of CS, when it comes time and you think you're interested and raise your hand, you don't have the fundamentals, and it's sometimes very hard to get back to it. So I'm curious from a business viewpoint, any thoughts or comments you guys have, or if there's an appetite to pursue some of those areas as well.
I think that makes sense, looking at the math stats that you showed in the previous slide.
One other question I had for folks is, are there, I guess, so Catherine, you mentioned that y'all are working with Project Lead the Way at Code to College. Are there other programs, outreach efforts your companies are doing to support STEM education that perhaps can be better supported by policymakers? So we're not necessarily recreating the wheel everywhere. Okay, conversation to be continued. All right.
Everybody take a shot of coffee.
Do we want to move on to the next slide? Oh, 1 minute. So I guess I can get previewed on it while the slides are loading, but overall, this conversation is just getting started. We're hoping to, expand it and have it grow and bring in more folks as we get going here. But the idea is that we want to establish kind of an advocacy working group to eventually develop an agenda for the 2023 legislative session that can include ideas like the loan forgiveness, systems alignment to make it less bureaucratic on the workforce and earn to learn systems, and many other ideas. We can include HB 244 again. I think that's a great bill. So the idea is to kind of develop this agenda from an industry-led standpoint under a unified umbrella, because right now that's the thing that's missing in Texas, is there's not really all these companies, I'm sure your companies all have great government relations operations, but it's not necessarily tied. I guess the unified focus isn't necessarily education. And so what we're trying to do here is get a unified voice under one umbrella that's industry led, so that we can get policymakers to understand this issue from an industry standpoint and highlight industry voice to further these advocacy objectives and make the underlying message clear that STEM computer science education can no longer be seen as a luxury, but a necessity. So that's the goal of this. And again, we're going to shop this out to all of our colleagues that can be on the call today. I got actually many emails back to folks couldn't join that I invited. So I know there are more folks interested. But yeah, we really want folks to be a part of this. We're going to have recurring meetings. And as part of these recurring meetings, I think this is where we're going to loop in some of our partners from the education space, just kind of talk through this with us and have a dialogue, so that we can all have a better understanding of how industry can support education, the education system, and how the education system can support industry, and then develop policy recommendations based on those conversations. And yes, CS for TX is a great group. I work with code.org, national efforts here in Washington. They are very, very organized when it comes to their state efforts and their federal efforts. And it's a great model to learn from, and they'd be great partners to include on this. So I have welcome all these ideas.
I was going to make a comment. I think there's great hope in where we stand at this moment. The issues haven't changed. There's been a ton more visibility. That's the silver lining to what we've all gone through recently on visibility around education. And we have in Texas a great example with the broadband legislation that went forward. You had two legislators come together with partnership with Texas 2036. Many of you know that name, and drafted a document to the governor. From there, Texas 2036, if you will, shopped it out and got the nonprofits, the education, the municipalities. Our group was very involved in adding additional signatures. And then ultimately, we had House Bill 5 go forward that laid a plan, a strategic plan for the state to move forward on. Now, that may not be the exact same solution here, but what we do know is when you have broad advocacies and the missing secret ingredient that's never been in this, I say never, that's not a fair statement, that has been in, but not all, with the power at the tip around one piece of either legislation or advocacy point is business. And so that's what we're trying to coalesce. And Ryan, we very much want TX for CX involved. I've been on that advocacy group, but we wanted to kind of see how this was playing out. But this is not a dialogue about STEM. Hopefully it's not about CS. By bringing these common threads together, not that we don't tease out later on, do you need something specific for STEM? Is that math in 8th grade? Do you need foundations of CS in middle school for the CS group? We'll tease that out, but this is a major highway that we have to build together, no different than broadband. And we've got some good examples with the broadband that's happened here in Texas. So we're eager to replicate that energy. And while we all still feel the pinch of educational challenges, we don't want people to forget what happened here, would be our hope. Sorry, I get very passionate about this. All right, any other words of wisdom? Trish, I think you're going to capture the thread so that anybody who's been listening versus following it might be able to grab that back, and we'll have this video. But any other words of wisdom or comments?
I could just chime in and just say one thing, that I just encourage all the employers to bring your colleagues, right? We want to get the more the merrier. And right now we realize that just given past legislation here in Texas, in order for us to really get things improved, we need all hands on deck. So the next time that we have this corporate convening, I just encourage you all to bring a friend, actually, bring 2 friends with you next time so that we can just get more and more people supporting this, because we have a long way to go between now and 2023.
And actually shorter term than that, we do hope to have that advocacy work group established, to get more input and really roll up our sleeves to figure out how this is going to go forward.
Yeah.
Thanks,
so-
Michael, for your vote of confidence.
Yes, cheers to that. Yeah, so we hope to get this conversation going here and perhaps maybe even have, an initial meeting just to, make some introductions perhaps before the end of the year. But then starting next year, really, have some recurring meetings going and ideas being shared. So yeah, please do sign up. This is based on what I personally have done in other states like Utah and Idaho and New York and Oregon, done these same exact efforts in those states, and they've been really successful in producing some meaningful legislation. So I'm excited about this. I'm excited for Texas policymakers to really start seeing this, to really start seeing STEM and computer science as the necessity it should be, and to see the Lone Star states keep flourishing even more than it is now.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. Amazing. We've got 10 minutes to give back. Thank you for being here. We'll look forward to following up with you and establishing the advocacy work group to really roll our sleeves up.